Welcome to another episode of History in Your Wallet. Since we just celebrated the 250th anniversary of independence here in the United States, I thought that today we would focus on world banknotes that were made in America. And we're going to begin during World War II. So that was when the United States printed Allied military currency, or AMC for short, which was issued for liberated or occupied territories and paid to U.S. soldiers at a fixed rate of exchange. So AMC was produced to supplement existing local currency and ensure that Allied forces had enough money to pay costs in targeted areas. AMC was denominated in the monetary units of the affected countries, so like francs that you can see here, or marks, but they were ultimately only legal tender if the local commanders on the ground said so. The currency was then withdrawn once the area's economic and currency situation stabilized. And the United States Bureau of Engraving and Printing, or BEP, took the lead on producing the Allied military currency. But it was impossible for the Bureau to meet the demand and deadlines. And so the BEP contracted with privately owned printing plants, including Forbes Lithograph Manufacturing Company of Boston, who printed the five notes that I'm going to show you here today. The Bureau representatives were stationed at the plants to supervise the currency production, and there were Secret Service agents protecting Forbes. And ultimately, Forbes printed over 4 billion Allied notes during the war, which is incredible. And that includes these two notes here for France. So, first up, we have a 2 francs note issued in 1944. Here on the obverse, you can see two torches flanking kind of the central denomination and text here. It's very simple. You have a nice green coloring along with some intricate lathe work that goes around the edge here. And you can see series of 1944 over there on the right. You can also see way down here in the bottom, and I'll blow this up on the screen for you, a tiny letter F. That is the printer's code that denotes that this banknote was printed by Forbes. And then as we turn it over to the reverse, you have this very striking and vivid image of the French flag and the French motto there. Just a beautiful color scheme. And it really kind of captures that spirit of liberation of France. Because this banknote, along with the next one, were issued during the initial stages of the liberation of France in 1944. And so the other note is the 5 franc banknote, which is essentially the same thing, but you'll notice that the text and the fives, these are printed in blue rather than in green. So otherwise, same design on the obverse, that same little letter F down there, and then the reverse is identical with this lovely image of the French flag. So 2 notes for France, and then the next 3 are for Germany. So first up is this half mark. This banknote is is a little busy with the lathe work behind the text here, and in fact, it really makes a lot of this text somewhat difficult to read. But of note, on the obverse for each of these notes, if you look down on the bottom right, you can see that letter F, the printer's code for Forbes. You also will note the 0 that starts the serial number here. So if the serial number begins with a single 0, like this note and the other 2 that I'll show you, that means that it was issued for the British occupation zone, and other adjustments to the serial number denote different occupation zones, and you can look those up on Numista. And as we turn this note over to the reverse, you have a fairly basic letter M for mark, or marks, presumably, with some elaborate brown scroll work around it. So very nice, fairly simple. The 1 mark is essentially identical, except here you have the 1 and some of the text in blue rather than in green. So kind of a similar style to what happened with those French notes. And then I'll show you the reverse, even though it's the same, that same letter M. And then lastly, we go to a 5 marks note, which has a very nice purple lettering and purple numerals here. In fact, the only text on here that really is not in purple is the serial number and the text up here on the top. So a very nice purple coloring, but the reverse is that kind of same brown M. So nothing too exciting to end the notes from Forbes. But now we're going to move on to the American Banknote Corporation. We have two banknotes printed by that company, which was founded in 1795 and was historically based in New York. So that's when they printed the two notes that I will show you today. This first one here is from the Netherlands East Indies. It is a one golden note issued in 1943 during World War II, just like the two notes or the few notes we just showed you here. The obverse of this note features a portrait of Queen Wilhelmina over here on the right, as well as a coat of arms on the left. You can also see American Banknote Company printed down here on the bottom. The serial number is in red. Otherwise, you have a predominantly brown and black banknote. And as we turn it over to the reverse, you will see a stylized number one for the denomination. You have again American Banknote Company, and then in two different languages here is the criminal code against counterfeiting. So this banknote was issued by the Netherlands Indies Civil Administration, which covered modern day Indonesia, and it was going to be used in the territories that were recaptured from the Japanese. So even though this banknote here is dated 1943, it very likely was not issued into the Netherlands East Indies until 1944, possibly even 1945, depending on which campaign it was introduced in. So, an interesting tidbit there tying us to World War II history. But we're going to move forward in time to the 1980s and travel to the island nation of Seychelles for this 25 rupees note. It is not dated, but it was issued in 1989. The obverse features the central bank of the Seychelles building here in the center. You got some fish here on either side jumping. Down on the bottom left, you have two men who are working with coconuts. And then there's a young boy up here on the right surrounded by some palm fronds. This note is a very lovely coloring going from purple to green to a little bit of an orange hue here. And then if we look at the watermark over in the left, very visible there is the head of a bird or some kind of animal. But it is the reverse scene of this banknote from the American Banknote Company that I find to be the most interesting. So this shows a copra mill or a coconut mill. It is an ox-driven mill that was used to crush dried coconut flesh called copra to extract oil. And it's essentially a large mortar and pestle that's operated by an ox, sometimes by a donkey or cow. But the animal is going to be walking in a circle here, where there's a man behind kind of guiding this large lever. And it is ultimately operating this big piece of wood that is crushing and grinding up the coconut flesh to extract oil, because coconut oil was a major export from the Seychelles. There were a lot of coconut plantations, and so this very primitive piece of equipment was commonplace on those plantations for decades, if not centuries. Now, the byproduct of this process, kind of that leftover crushed coconut flesh, was called punak, and it was used as cattle feed, so possibly to feed the same animals that are operating this large mill. So, just a very unique vignette and a very interesting banknote that was made here in America. And then we're going to end with two banknotes printed by Crane Currency, which was founded in 1801 and is based in Massachusetts. And we're going to begin with this lovely banknote from Fiji. This is a new $20 banknote. It was dated for 2025, but it was ultimately released into circulation this year in 2026. And on the obverse, you have the Fiji petrel, which is only known to nest on Gow Island in Fiji. So, very interesting, a very beautiful native bird here. The bird actually spends much of its life over the ocean, and that's what I think this banknote captures very beautifully here. And then as we turn it over to the reverse, you can see the Reserve Bank of Fiji building. The RBF was established as the country's central bank in 1984. The clear window that is over here on the right and also visible on the uh, face of this polymer banknote features a coconut scraper. But also, very interestingly, this banknote has Crane Currency's motion surface stripe. So if you look over here on this vertical stripe here, at the top you can see the Fijian coat of arms. And then on the bottom, you have some leaves with some water droplets. So as we tilt this note, we will see the coat of arms kind of appear and disappear. Hopefully, doesn't come through super well in the camera, but it kind of appears and disappears a little bit. But then you can also, if you look at the droplets on the water there, on the leaves, you can kind of see them shimmering. They almost look 3D, those water droplets on the leaves right there. So, a very interesting and unique feature that was added to this banknote from Fiji. So, a cool polymer banknote. And then we will end with a vertical banknote from Aruba, printed by Crane Currency. This is a 10 florin note issued in 2019. It was part of a new series featuring the island's wildlife, as well as flowers and culture and history. So here on the obverse, you have featured very prominently a green sea turtle here. Up at the top, you have a spotted trunk fish, common in coral reefs. And then down at the bottom, you have a common sea fan, and so this really beautifully captures some of the creatures in the ocean around Aruba. This banknote also has that motion surface stripe right here. So if we move it around a little bit, you get a sense of kind of 3D. Kind of see that movement in those circles in that stripe there. So just a really interesting feature that almost makes it look like there is another layer to this banknote here. So very cool, very striking blue color. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the watermark, which is a very adorable burrowing owl right there. But turning it over to the reverse, at the top, we have another sea turtle. We have some tiles that run down the length of this banknote here. These are historic tile designs from historic houses. And then the ruins here on this banknote are of the Burj Irbana gold mill, which was built in the 19th century to extract gold from nearby hills. So the ruins still exist and are a place that you can go visit, I believe, located within a national park. So a very cool banknote that ends our theme video today, focusing on world banknotes made in America. So let me know what you think about these banknotes. If you have any other banknotes that you can think of that were printed here in the United States for countries around the world, be sure to comment below. Also, like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, thank you for watching.